The sound of gunfire ripped through the afternoon sky as Hannah Kingston ducked behind an overturned wagon, her heart hammering against her ribs. What had started as a routine journey to her new teaching position in Desdemona, Texas, had descended into chaos when outlaws attacked the stagecoach. The year was 1875, and the promise of a fresh start in the West now seemed like a cruel joke as bullets splintered the wood mere inches from her head. "Get out here, little lady," a gruff voice called. "We ain't gonna hurt ya. Much." Hannah's hands trembled as she clutched her small valise, containing everything she owned in the world. The driver and shotgun messenger both lay dead in the dirt 20 yards away. The other passengers, an elderly couple and a traveling salesman, had been dragged off in another direction, their terrified screams now silent. She was alone. 22 years old, and about to die in a territory she'd only stepped foot in yesterday. Hannah closed her eyes, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged face. She thought of her parents back in Boston, both gone from influenza last winter. They would never know what happened to their only daughter. Found her. A rough hand grabbed her ankle, dragging her from her hiding place. Hannah screamed, kicking wildly as a bearded outlaw with tobacco-stained teeth pulled her into the harsh sunlight. 3 other men circled around, their eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "Well, ain't you a pretty one?" said the largest man, clearly their leader. A jagged scar ran from his left eye to the corner of his mouth. "Teacher, are ya? That's what your papers say. Too bad you won't make it to that schoolhouse." Hannah struggled against her captor's grip. "Please, I have nothing of value, just let me go." The men laughed, a sound that chilled her to the bone. "Oh, I think you got something of value, all right," the leader said, reaching for her. The world seemed to slow down as terror consumed her. The edges of her vision darkened, her lungs constricting as if iron bands were tightening around her chest. The last thing she heard was the sudden thunder of approaching hoofbeats before darkness claimed her. Vaughn Mitchell had been tracking the Scar Jackson gang for 3 weeks. As a Texas Ranger, he'd sworn to bring these men to justice for a string of stagecoach robberies that had left 12 people dead across 3 counties. When he heard shots in the distance, he knew he'd finally caught up to them. He approached cautiously, leading his horse through the scrub until he could assess the situation. What he saw made his blood boil. 4 men surrounding a young woman who looked moments away from collapsing. He didn't need to see more. Drawing his Colt Peacemaker, Vaughn took aim and fired. His first shot caught the outlaw holding the woman square in the back. As the man fell, the woman's eyes rolled back and she began to crumple toward the ground. Vaughn charged forward on his horse, firing again and hitting a second outlaw in the shoulder. The remaining 2 men scattered, diving for cover behind the wrecked stagecoach. Reaching the young woman just as she fainted, Vaughn leaped from his saddle and caught her before she hit the ground. His arm slid behind her back as gunfire erupted around them. Pulling her behind the cover of a large boulder, he held her limp form against his chest. "You're safe," he whispered, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "I've got you now." Keeping one arm around her, he fired back at the outlaws, driving them further into defensive positions. He needed to get her out of the line of fire. Whistling for his horse, Vaughn scooped the unconscious woman into his arms and mounted in one fluid motion, a skill earned from years in the saddle. He spurred his horse away from the ambush site, knowing the outlaws would either follow or run. Either way, his priority now was the woman's safety. After riding hard for about a mile, he found a small grove of cottonwood trees near a creek. He dismounted carefully, still cradling the woman, and laid her gently on a patch of soft grass. Dipping his bandana in the cool water, he dabbed it against her forehead and cheeks. "Miss, can you hear me?" he asked softly. Hannah felt cool dampness against her face, pulling her back from the darkness. Her eyelids fluttered open to reveal the most striking pair of blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face framed by dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his shirt. She gasped and tried to scramble away, the memory of the outlaws still fresh in her mind. "Whoa there," the man said, his deep voice surprisingly gentle. "You're safe now. I'm Ranger Vaughn Mitchell, Texas Rangers. Those men can't hurt you anymore." Hannah's gaze darted around wildly before settling back on his face. He wore a silver star on his vest, and something about his steady gaze calmed her racing heart. "The other passengers," she whispered. There was an elderly couple and a salesman. Vaughn's expression darkened. "I'm sorry, miss, I arrived too late for them." Hannah covered her mouth as a sob escaped. "They killed them, all of them. The Jackson gang doesn't leave witnesses," he said grimly. "You're lucky I was tracking them. May I ask your name, miss?" Hannah Kingston," she managed, trying to compose herself. "I was on my way to Desdemona." "I'm to be the new schoolteacher there," Vaughn nodded, offering her his canteen. "Desdemona's about half a day's ride from here. We'll get you there safe, Miss Kingston, but first we need to put more distance between us and those outlaws." "You didn't capture them?" Hannah asked, taking a small sip of water. "Two down, two still out there," Vaughn replied. "And they'll be looking for revenge. Scar Jackson doesn't take kindly to having his plans disrupted." A sudden rustle in the bushes had Vaughn on his feet, gun drawn in one fluid motion. Hannah stifled a scream as he positioned himself in front of her. "Stay behind me," he ordered quietly. The tension in the air was palpable as Vaughn aimed at the source of the noise. A moment later, a jackrabbit darted out from the underbrush and bounded away. Hannah released a shaky breath, but Vaughn remained vigilant. "We need to move," he said, holstering his weapon. "Can you ride?" "Yes," Hannah replied, though in truth she'd only ridden placid mares on Boston's manicured bridle paths. "At least I believe I can." Vaughn's lips quirked in a half-smile. "You'll ride with me, it's safer that way." Before she could protest, he was helping her to her feet. Hannah swayed slightly, still dizzy from her fainting spell. Vaughn's strong hands steadied her, and for a moment they stood close enough that she could smell the leather and pine scent of him. Something fluttered in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. "Thank you," she said softly, "for saving my life." His eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, the hardened ranger's expression softened. "Just doing my job, Miss Kingston." Yet there was something in the way he said it that suggested perhaps it was more than that. Vaughn helped Hannah onto his horse before mounting behind her. The intimacy of the position, his chest against her back, his arms around her to hold the reins, made her cheeks flush despite their dangerous situation. They rode through the afternoon, keeping to less traveled trails. Vaughn explained he was taking a circuitous route to Desdemona to throw off any potential pursuit. Hannah learned he had been a Texas Ranger for 5 years, having joined after the war. He didn't elaborate on which side he'd fought for, and she didn't ask. "The Jackson gang has been terrorizing this part of Texas for nearly a year," Vaughn explained as they rode. "Started with cattle rustling, moved up to bank robberies, and now they're hitting stagecoaches. Governors put a bounty on Scar's head, $3,000, dead or alive." "Is that why you're after them, the bounty?" Hannah asked. Vaughn's voice hardened. "No, madam. 6 months ago they raided a settlement near the Red River, killed everyone, men, women, children. One of the women was my cousin. I promised my aunt I'd bring them to justice." Hannah fell silent, understanding the personal nature of his pursuit. After a while she asked, "What will happen when we reach Desdemona? Will you continue after the remaining outlaws?" "I'll get you settled safely first," Vaughn replied. "The town has a decent sheriff, Bill Harding. He's an old friend. He'll keep an eye on you while I finish what I started." As the sun began to set, Vaughn directed his horse toward a small canyon. "We'll make camp here for the night. It's defensible, has water, and we can see anyone approaching from a distance." The reality of spending the night alone with a man, even one who had saved her life, made Hannah nervous. In Boston, such a situation would ruin a woman's reputation irreparably. But this was the frontier, and different rules applied when survival was at stake. Vaughn seemed to sense her discomfort. "I'll keep watch while you rest, Miss Kingston. You have my word as a ranger that you'll come to no harm in my care." There was something so steadfast and honorable in his demeanor that Hannah found herself trusting him implicitly, despite having known him for mere hours. As darkness fell, Vaughn built a small, nearly smokeless fire in a protected hollow of rock where its light wouldn't be visible from a distance. He shared his provisions, jerky, hardtack, and coffee, which Hannah accepted gratefully. "Tell me about the teaching position," Vaughn said as they ate, clearly trying to distract her from the day's horrors. Hannah was grateful for the shift in conversation. "Desdemona is building its first proper school. Until now, children have been taught in the church when the circuit preacher isn't using it. They've raised funds for a schoolhouse and hired me to teach children from 6 to 16 years of age. That's quite an age range for one teacher." "It is," Hannah agreed, "but that's common in frontier schools. I'll have to be creative with my methods. The older children can help teach the younger ones. I believe in practical education, reading and arithmetic, of course, but also skills they'll need for life out here." Vaughn seemed genuinely interested. "How does a Boston lady end up teaching in a Texas oil town?" Hannah's expression grew somber. "My parents died last winter, influenza. They left debts I couldn't pay, so I sold everything except what I could carry and answered an advertisement in the Boston Globe. Desdemona was offering the highest salary of any frontier town seeking a teacher." "I'm sorry about your parents," Vaughn said quietly. "Losing family isn't easy." "No, it isn't," Hannah agreed. "But Desdemona represents a fresh start, at least it did until today." "Don't let today change your mind," Vaughn said firmly. "The West has its dangers, that's true, but it also has good people building something worthwhile. Towns like Desdemona need people like you, educated, brave." "Brave?" Hannah shook her head. "I fainted from fear. That's hardly brave." Vaughn's expression was serious as he looked at her across the small fire. "Fear isn't the absence of bravery, Miss Kingston, it's the test of it. You survived today. You're still heading toward your future instead of running back east. I'd call that brave." His words warmed her more than the fire. For the first time since the attack, Hannah felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps her Western adventure wasn't doomed after all. As the night deepened, Vaughn insisted Hannah take his bedroll while he kept watch. Too exhausted to argue, she lay down, watching as he sat with his back against a boulder, rifle across his knees, scanning the darkness beyond their small camp. "Ranger Mitchell," she said softly. He turned to look at her. "Yes, Miss Kingston, thank you for everything." A small smile touched his lips. "Get some rest, we have a long ride tomorrow." Despite her ordeal, Hannah fell into a deep sleep, feeling safer than she had any right to under the circumstances. She woke once in the night to find Vaughn placing his coat over her against the desert chill. Their eyes met briefly in the dying firelight before she drifted back to sleep. Dawn came with a golden glow that transformed the harsh landscape into something almost beautiful. Hannah stirred, momentarily disoriented before the events of yesterday rushed back. She sat up quickly, looking around for Vaughn. He stood several yards away by the edge of the canyon, scanning the horizon with a small brass spyglass. The early light silhouetted his tall form, and Hannah found herself studying him with newfound interest. There was an undeniable strength in his broad shoulders and the way he carried himself, but it was tempered with a gentleness she'd glimpsed in his care for her. Feeling her gaze, Vaughn turned and walked back to the camp. "Good morning, Miss Kingston. I hope you managed some rest." "Better than I would have expected," she admitted, folding his coat and offering it back to him. "Thank you for this." Their fingers brushed as he took the coat, and Hannah felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach. She quickly busied herself with smoothing her rumpled traveling dress. "I've been watching the trail," Vaughn said, seemingly unaffected by the brief contact. "No sign of pursuit, but we should get moving all the same. We can reach Desdemona by midday if we make good time." They broke camp efficiently, Vaughn insisting Hannah eat something before they set off. As they rode, the landscape gradually changed from rugged canyons to rolling hills dotted with mesquite and live oak. The heat built as the morning progressed, and Hannah was grateful for the occasional patches of shade. "Tell me about Desdemona," she requested, partly out of genuine curiosity and partly to distract herself from the awareness of Vaughn's chest pressed against her back. "It started as a small farming settlement called Hogtown," he explained. "Changed its name to Desdemona about 20 years ago, supposedly after a local girl with that name, though some say it was from Shakespeare. It was quiet until they struck oil last year. Now it's growing fast, too fast, some would say." "Is that good or bad for a teacher?" Hannah asked. "Both, I expect. More children to teach, but also more saloons and troublemakers. The money brings all sorts. But Sheriff Harding runs a tight town. He doesn't tolerate the kind of lawlessness you'll find in places like Tascosa or Hell's Half Acre in Fort Worth." As they crested a hill around noon, Vaughn reined in his horse. "There it is, Desdemona." Hannah's first glimpse of her new home was a collection of wooden buildings straddling a dusty main street, with newer structures being built on the outskirts. A church steeple rose above the other buildings, and she could make out several oil derricks in the distance. "It's smaller than I expected," she admitted. Vaughn chuckled, a warm sound that rumbled against her back. "Most things out here start small, Miss Kingston. But they grow quickly if they've got the right foundation." As they approached the town, Hannah became acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. Her dress was wrinkled and dust-covered, her hair coming loose from its pins. What impression would she make on the town council that had hired her? Vaughn seemed to read her thoughts. "Don't worry. Once they hear what happened, no one will think twice about how you look." They rode down the main street, attracting curious stares from townspeople going about their business. Vaughn nodded to several people who greeted him by name, making it clear he was known and respected here. He directed his horse toward a solidly built structure with "Sheriff" painted on a wooden sign. As they dismounted, a broad-shouldered man with a salt and pepper beard emerged, adjusting his hat against the midday sun. "Vaughn Mitchell," the man called. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon. Thought you were chasing the Jackson gang clear to the Panhandle." "Bill," Vaughn greeted, helping Hannah down from the horse. "Circumstances changed. This is Miss Hannah Kingston, your new schoolteacher. She was on the stagecoach the Jackson gang hit yesterday." Sheriff Harding's expression darkened as he turned to Hannah. "Miss Kingston, I'm terribly sorry about what happened. We got word this morning about the stagecoach. Didn't know you were on it." "Miss Kingston is the only survivor," Vaughn said quietly. "I interrupted the gang before they could finish their business, but 2 of them got away, including Scar." The sheriff removed his hat respectfully. "You've been through an ordeal, madam. Let me send for Mrs. Porter. She's the chairman of the school board and has been preparing for your arrival. She can get you settled." Within minutes, a plump, energetic woman in her 50s arrived, her face creased with concern when she heard what had happened. "You poor dear," Mrs. Porter exclaimed, taking Hannah's hands in hers. "To think you might have been killed before even reaching us. Thank the Lord for Ranger Mitchell." Hannah managed a small smile. "Yes, I owe him my life." "We've prepared the rooms above the new schoolhouse for you," Mrs. Porter continued. "It's not fancy, but it's clean and private. You'll take your meals with us until you get settled. I won't hear any arguments about that." As the woman chattered on about the school and the children eagerly awaiting their new teacher, Hannah glanced back at Vaughn, who was deep in conversation with Sheriff Harding. Their eyes met briefly across the street, and he gave her a reassuring nod. Mrs. Porter followed her gaze. "Ranger Mitchell is a good man," she said. "One of the best. His family's ranch is about 20 miles north of here. He doesn't get back as often as his mother would like, what with his ranger duties." "I didn't know he was from here," Hannah said, surprised to learn he had local connections. "Born and raised," Mrs. Porter confirmed. "Now, let's get you cleaned up and rested. You can meet the town council tomorrow when you've recovered from your ordeal." Hannah allowed herself to be led away, casting one last glance over her shoulder. Vaughn was watching her go, his expression unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. The new schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a simple but solidly built wooden structure with large windows to let in natural light. Upstairs was a snug apartment consisting of a bedroom, a small sitting room, and a modest kitchen. Someone had placed wildflowers in a jar on the table and hung fresh curtains at the windows. "It's lovely," Hannah said sincerely, touched by the thoughtfulness. "We want you to feel welcome, Mrs." Porter said, "Now you rest. I'll send my girl over with some fresh clothes and a hot meal later." Left alone, Hannah sank onto the bed, the events of the past 24 hours finally catching up with her. She was alive, thanks to Vaughn Mitchell. And now she was in Desdemona, ready to begin her new life if she could put the trauma behind her. She walked to the window, which overlooked the main street. In the distance, she could see Vaughn and Sheriff Harding still talking outside the sheriff's office. Even from here, there was something compelling about the ranger's tall figure and the confident way he carried himself. "Thank you," she whispered, though he couldn't hear her, "for giving me this chance." The next morning, Hannah awoke feeling refreshed after her first night in a proper bed since leaving Boston. Mrs. Porter's daughter had brought over a trunk of donated clothing the previous evening, simple but well-made dresses that needed only minor alterations to fit Hannah's slender frame. Dressed in a pale blue calico dress with her honey-brown hair neatly pinned up, Hannah ventured downstairs to explore her new schoolroom. The town had done well. There were proper desks, a small blackboard, and even a modest collection of books on a shelf at the back of the room. She was examining a map of the United States mounted on the wall when she heard footsteps on the wooden porch. Turning, she found Vaughn Mitchell filling the doorway, hat in hand. "Good morning, Miss Kingston," he said. "I wanted to check on you before I left. You're leaving?" Hannah asked, surprised by the disappointment that flooded through her. Vaughn nodded, stepping into the schoolroom. "I need to finish what I started. Scar Jackson and his remaining man are still out there. They'll keep killing unless they're stopped." "Of course," Hannah said, trying to mask her emotions. "I understand." Vaughn walked closer, his spurs jingling softly on the wooden floor. "Sheriff Harding will keep an eye on you, and I've asked some friends to check in regularly as well. You'll be safe here." "I'm not afraid," Hannah said, then corrected herself. "Well, perhaps a little, but I won't let fear stop me from doing what I came here to do." A smile tugged at Vaughn's lips. "I knew you were brave." They stood in silence for a moment, neither quite ready to say goodbye. "I owe you a debt I can never repay," Hannah finally said. "You owe me nothing," Vaughn replied firmly, "but I would ask a favor." "Anything," Hannah said without hesitation. "The children who come to your school, teach them that there's more to strength than a gun or a fist. Teach them about courage and honor and doing what's right even when it's hard." His voice had grown intense, revealing a glimpse of the passion beneath his controlled exterior. "I will," Hannah promised. "Is that what someone taught you?" "My father," Vaughn said softly, "before he died." Another silence fell between them, heavier this time. "When will you return?" Hannah asked. "When the job is done," Vaughn answered. "Could be weeks, could be longer." Hannah nodded, trying not to show her disappointment. "Well then, Ranger Mitchell, I wish you safe travels and a successful hunt." Vaughn hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, offering it to her. "I want you to have this, for luck." Hannah opened her palm to receive a polished stone, smooth and oval with a streak of blue running through it. "It's a river stone," Vaughn explained. "My father gave it to me when I was a boy, said it would always help me find my way home." Hannah's fingers closed around the stone, deeply touched by the gesture. "I can't accept this, it's too personal." "I want you to have it," Vaughn insisted. "Besides, I know where it is if I need it back." The implication that he would return for it, and perhaps for her, hung in the air between them. "Be safe, Miss Kingston," he said finally, settling his hat back on his head. "And you, Ranger Mitchell." He turned to go, then paused at the doorway. "When I return, perhaps you might call me Vaughn." Before she could respond, he was gone, boots echoing on the wooden steps. Hannah opened her hand and looked at the stone, smooth from years of being carried. Something had begun between them in the aftermath of danger, something neither had expected but both now felt. She tucked the stone into her pocket, a tangible reminder of the man who had saved her life and then ridden away to save others. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity as Hannah settled into her role as Desdemona's schoolteacher. The school opened with 28 pupils ranging from 6-year-old Betsy Collins, who could barely write her letters, to 16-year-old James Porter, Mrs. Porter's nephew, who was already helping his father in their mercantile business, but came to school to improve his mathematics. Hannah threw herself into teaching, developing a curriculum that blended traditional subjects with practical skills her students would need on the frontier. In the mornings, they focused on reading, writing, and arithmetic. Afternoons were devoted to history, geography, and science, often taught through practical applications. The work was exhausting but rewarding. Hannah found herself thinking less about the terror of the stagecoach attack and more about her students' progress. Yet in quiet moments, her thoughts inevitably turned to Vaughn Mitchell. She would reach into her pocket, feeling the smooth stone he had given her, and wonder where he was and if he was safe. News came sporadically. A week after Vaughn left, word reached Desdemona that one of Scar Jackson's men had been captured near Fort Worth. 2 weeks later, Sheriff Harding received a telegram saying Vaughn had tracked Scar to the Indian Territories, but lost his trail during a thunderstorm. As September gave way to October, the nights grew cooler. Hannah added a geography lesson about mountain ranges to explain why the temperature was dropping, using the opportunity to teach her students about climates and seasons. It was during this lesson, almost a month after Vaughn's departure, that a commotion outside drew her attention. The pounding of hooves and shouts from the street caused the children to rush to the windows. "Everyone, please return to your seats," Hannah instructed, though curiosity pulled her to the window as well. A rider was coming down the main street at a gallop, his horse lathered with sweat. It took Hannah a moment to recognize Sheriff Harding. He reined in sharply in front of the saloon where several men were lounging on the porch. Though she couldn't hear what was said, she saw the men grab rifles and mount up with obvious urgency. The sheriff pointed north, and the impromptu posse rode out of town. "Miss Kingston." James Porter stood beside her, his young face concerned. "Is something wrong?" Hannah composed herself. "I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. Now, who can tell me the name of the mountain range between the United States and Mexico?" She continued the lesson, but her attention was divided. What had caused such alarm? Was it connected to Vaughn and his pursuit of the outlaw? When school dismissed at 4 o'clock, Hannah hurried to Mrs. Porter's house where she still took her evening meals. "Oh, my dear, you've heard the news then," Mrs. Porter said when she arrived. "I saw the sheriff gathering men," Hannah replied. "What's happened?" Mrs. Porter wrung her hands in her apron. "Scar Jackson was spotted at the Watson farm just north of town. He killed Mr. Watson and took Mrs. Watson hostage. They say he's demanding Ranger Mitchell in exchange for the woman's life." Hannah's blood ran cold. "But Ranger Mitchell isn't here. He's tracking Jackson." "That's just it," Mrs. Porter said gravely. "Ranger Mitchell returned last night. He was at his family's ranch when word came about Jackson. He rode out with the sheriff to try to save Mrs. Watson." Hannah sank into a chair, fear gripping her heart. Vaughn had returned but hadn't come to see her, and now he was riding into a trap set by a murderous outlaw. "I should have known," Mrs. Porter said, misreading Hannah's distress. "You two formed a bond during your ordeal. Of course you'd be worried for him." "Is there anything we can do?" Hannah asked. Mrs. Porter shook her head. "Just pray, my dear, pray that our men return safely." The waiting was excruciating. Hannah picked at her dinner, unable to eat as her mind conjured terrible scenarios. She excused herself early and returned to her rooms above the schoolhouse, where she paced until well past midnight. She was standing at her window, watching the empty street, when she finally saw riders returning. In the dim light of the street lamps, she counted 5 men where at least 8 had ridden out. Without thinking, Hannah grabbed a shawl and hurried downstairs and out into the night. The October air was crisp as she ran toward the group dismounting in front of the sheriff's office. "Sheriff Harding," she called. "What happened? Is everyone all right?" The sheriff turned, his face grave in the lamplight. "Miss Kingston, you should be in bed." "Please," she begged, scanning the group for Vaughn. "Is Ranger Mitchell?" "He's alive," the sheriff said, "but he's been shot. Doc Jenkins is tending to him at his office." Hannah didn't wait to hear more. She gathered her skirts and ran toward the doctor's small clinic 2 buildings down. The door stood open, light spilling onto the porch. Inside, she found an elderly man bent over a still form on an examination table. Vaughn lay there, his shirt cut away, his torso wrapped in bloody bandages. His face was ashen beneath his tan, his eyes closed. "Sir?" Hannah's voice trembled. "I'm Hannah Kingston, the schoolteacher. How is he?" Dr. Jenkins glanced up, his spectacles perched on the end of his nose. "Ah, Miss Kingston, I've heard about you. Ranger Mitchell's been shot in the shoulder, lost a fair amount of blood, but the bullet passed clean through. If infection doesn't set in, he should recover." Relief made Hannah's knees weak. "Thank God, and Mrs. Watson, did they save her?" The doctor's expression darkened. "Mrs. Watson is with her husband now, I'm afraid. Jackson shot her before they could reach her. But they got him. Ranger Mitchell put a bullet between his eyes before he collapsed from his own wound." Hannah closed her eyes briefly, mourning the senseless loss of the Watsons while grateful that at least the man responsible would claim no more victims. "Can I stay with him?" she asked. The doctor hesitated. "It's not entirely proper, Miss Kingston, you being unmarried and all." "I'll just sit with him until he wakes," Hannah insisted. "Just to know he's all right, please." Something in her expression must have convinced the doctor. "Very well. I need to check on Sheriff Harding's arm anyway. He took a graze. You can sit with Ranger Mitchell until I return. But only until then, mind you." Hannah nodded gratefully and pulled a chair close to the examination table as the doctor left. Alone with Vaughn, she studied his face. Even unconscious, there was strength in his features, the straight nose, the firm jaw now dark with stubble. Hesitantly, she reached out and took his hand. His skin was calloused but warm, a reassuring sign of life. "You did it," she whispered. "You kept your promise to your aunt. Scar Jackson won't hurt anyone else." She didn't expect a response, but Vaughn's fingers tightened slightly around hers. His eyelids fluttered, then opened to reveal those startling blue eyes now clouded with pain. "Hannah," he murmured, his voice rough. Her heart leaped at hearing her given name on his lips for the first time. "I'm here, don't try to move, you've been shot." "Jackson, dead," she confirmed. "You killed him." Vaughn closed his eyes briefly. "Too late for the Watsons." "You did everything you could," Hannah said firmly. "You kept your word. You brought him to justice." He looked at her again, more clarity in his gaze now. "You shouldn't be here." "Your reputation, I don't care," Hannah interrupted. "I needed to know you were all right." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You still have my stone." Hannah reached into her pocket and pulled out the river stone, placing it in his palm. "I've carried it every day for luck." Vaughn's fingers closed around the stone, then around her hand. "I thought of you out there, thought of coming back." The admission warmed her from within. "I thought of you too, every day." Dr. Jenkins returned then, clearing his throat from the doorway. "I see our patient is awake." "That's a good sign. Now, Miss Kingston, I must insist you return home. You can visit Ranger Mitchell tomorrow during proper hours." Hannah reluctantly stood, gently extracting her hand from Vaughn's. "I'll come tomorrow," she promised. Vaughn nodded, pressing the stone back into her hand. "Keep it safe for me." The following day was Saturday, allowing Hannah to visit the doctor's office early without neglecting her teaching duties. She found Vaughn sitting up, looking remarkably improved despite the bandages visible beneath the clean shirt someone had brought him. "The doctor says I'm not to ride for at least 2 weeks, he told her after greeting her with a warm smile that made her heart flutter. "Seems I'll be staying in Desdemona for a while." "Where will you stay?" Hannah asked. "Sheriff Harding has a spare room. He's offered it until I'm well enough to ride to my family's ranch." He studied her face. "I hear your school is doing well." Hannah settled into the chair beside his bed. It is. The children are eager to learn, even the older boys, which I'm told is unusual. That's because of their teacher, Vaughn said with conviction. I've heard people talking. They say you're a natural. Hannah blushed at the praise. I love teaching. These children deserve the best education I can give them, no matter what circumstances brought them to Desdemona. Like the circumstances that brought you here? Vaughn asked softly. Yes, Hannah acknowledged. Though I've come to believe those circumstances, however terrible, led me where I was meant to be. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding that transcended words. They had both survived ordeals that might have broken others, and those shared experiences had forged a connection neither had anticipated. In the days that followed, Hannah fell into a routine of teaching during the day and visiting Vaughn in the evenings. After the first few days, he was strong enough to move to Sheriff Harding's spare room, where Hannah would bring him books from the school's small library and share stories of her students' progress. As Vaughn recovered, he began taking short walks around town, often timing them to coincide with the end of the school day so he could walk Hannah home. The townspeople watched this developing relationship with knowing smiles and approving nods. 2 weeks after the shootout, Vaughn was deemed well enough to ride to his family's ranch. He found Hannah after school, looking more himself in his ranger clothing, though he still moved carefully to protect his healing shoulder. I'm leaving tomorrow, he told her as they walked slowly toward her rooms. My mother is anxious to see me, and I need to report to my captain about Jackson. Hannah felt a pang of disappointment but nodded. Of course. Your family must be worried, especially after hearing you were wounded. They stopped at the steps of the schoolhouse. The afternoon sunlight caught in Hannah's hair, turning it to gold, and Vaughn found himself memorizing her features as if he might not see her again. I'd like you to meet them, he said suddenly. My family, not tomorrow but soon. When I'm fully recovered, Hannah's eyes widened. You want me to meet your family? Yes, Vaughn said, his voice certain, very much, and there's something else I need to say before I go. He took her hands in his expression serious. When I caught you that day, when you fainted from fear and I whispered that you were safe, I had no idea how much those words would change my life. I've spent 5 years bringing criminals to justice, but I never thought about what comes after, about having a home, a family, a future beyond the next assignment. Hannah's heart began to race as she realized where this was leading. I don't have much to offer right now, Vaughn continued. A ranger's pay isn't substantial and the work is dangerous, but my father left me land, good land, and when I'm ready to hang up my badge, I'll have a place to build a life I'd like to share. Vaughn, Hannah whispered, hardly daring to hope. I'm not asking for an answer today, he said quickly. It's too soon, I know that, but I wanted you to know my intentions before I left, that I'll be coming back not just to Desdemona, but to you if you'll have me. Tears pricked at Hannah's eyes. I never expected to find someone like you, especially not under such circumstances. Is that a good thing? Vaughn asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. Hannah smiled through her tears. The best thing, and yes, I'd like to meet your family very much. Relief and joy spread across Vaughn's face. I'll be back in 2 weeks. Will you wait for me? Yes, Hannah said without hesitation. I'll wait. Vaughn's hands tightened around hers, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he brought her hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. 2 weeks, he promised. True to his word, Vaughn returned exactly 2 weeks later, riding into Desdemona on a crisp November afternoon just as school was dismissing. Hannah's heart soared at the sight of him. Now fully recovered and looking every inch the formidable Texas Ranger in his dusty buckskins and wide-brimmed hat. The children giggled and whispered as Vaughn dismounted and waited patiently for Hannah to finish gathering her teaching materials. Word had spread through the small town about the growing affection between the schoolteacher and the ranger, and the children were not immune to the romantic notion. You came back, Hannah said when she finally emerged from the schoolhouse. I promised I would, Vaughn replied, his blue eyes warm as they took in her appearance. You look well. Teaching agrees with you. It does, Hannah admitted. Though I've been counting the days until your return. A pleased smile touched Vaughn's lips. I've arranged everything with Sheriff Harding. He'll watch over the school tomorrow. My mother is expecting us for dinner if you're willing. Tomorrow, Hannah's eyes widened. But I need to prepare to find something suitable to wear. You're perfect as you are, Vaughn interrupted gently. But if it makes you more comfortable, we won't leave until morning. That should give you time to prepare. The next day dawned clear and cool. Hannah had spent the evening selecting her best dress, a deep green wool that complemented her eyes, and pinning her hair in a more elaborate style than she typically wore for teaching. Vaughn arrived at 8 o'clock with a wagon rather than his horse. It's more comfortable for the journey, he explained as he helped her up to the seat, and more proper than having you ride behind me on my horse. The Mitchell Ranch was indeed about 20 miles north of Desdemona, situated in a picturesque valley with a creek running through it. The main house was larger than Hannah had expected, a two-story structure built of stone and timber, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. As they approached, a woman emerged onto the porch. Even at a distance, Hannah could see the family resemblance. She had the same striking blue eyes as her son, though her hair, once dark like Vaughn's, was now streaked with silver. That's my mother, Eleanor, Vaughn said, a note of affection in his voice. And that's my younger brother Victor coming from the barn. A young man of about 20 was striding toward the wagon, his grin a mirror image of Vaughn's. Hannah suddenly felt nervous. What if they don't like me? Vaughn's hand covered hers. They'll love you, how could they not? His mother was already hurrying down the porch steps as Vaughn helped Hannah from the wagon. You must be Miss Kingston, Eleanor Mitchell said warmly, taking Hannah's hands in hers. My son has told us so much about you. Welcome to our home. Thank you for having me, Mrs. Mitchell, Hannah replied, instantly liking the woman's direct manner and kind eyes. Please call me Eleanor, and here's Victor, my youngest. My middle son, Vincent, is in Austin on business, I'm afraid, so you won't meet him today. Victor shook Hannah's hand with a mischievous grin. So you're the school teacher who's captured my brother's heart. I didn't think anything could compete with that Ranger badge of his. Victor, Vaughn warned, though there was no real heat in it. Eleanor linked her arm through Hannah's. Come inside, dear, you must be tired after your journey. I've prepared a light lunch, and then Vaughn can show you around the ranch while I finish preparing dinner. The Mitchell home was comfortable and well-appointed, with furniture that spoke of quality rather than ostentation. Family photographs and mementos decorated the walls, and a large stone fireplace dominated the main sitting room. Your home is lovely, Hannah said sincerely. It's been in the Mitchell family for 3 generations, Eleanor explained. My husband's grandfather was one of the first settlers in this part of Texas. We've added to it over the years, of course. Over lunch, Hannah learned more about the Mitchell family. Vaughn's father had died during the war, leaving Eleanor to run the ranch with the help of her 3 sons. The oldest, Vincent, handled the business side of the operation from Austin, while Victor managed the day-to-day ranch work. Vaughn had joined the Rangers after the war but still considered the ranch his home. After they ate, Vaughn took Hannah on a tour of the property. The ranch raised cattle primarily, but also had several fields of crops and a thriving orchard. It's beautiful, Hannah said as they walked along the creek that wound through the property. I can see why you love it here. I've been thinking, Vaughn said, stopping beneath a large cottonwood tree. About the future. Hannah's heart quickened. Oh, my captain has offered me a promotion, a desk position in Austin, less dangerous, better pay, regular hours. Is that what you want? Hannah asked, studying his face. Vaughn considered the question. A year ago, I'd have said no. I became a ranger to bring men like Scar Jackson to justice, not to shuffle papers. But now, he turned to face her fully. Now I have different priorities, things I want that don't align with riding the trails for months at a time. What things? Hannah asked softly, though she thought she knew the answer. Instead of replying directly, Vaughn reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. I had planned to wait until after dinner to do this properly, but I find I can't wait any longer. Hannah's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a simple but beautiful ring, a small diamond flanked by 2 sapphires. "Hannah Kingston," Vaughn said, his voice deep with emotion. "From the moment I caught you in my arms, something changed in me. I've faced outlaws and renegades without flinching, but the thought of a future without you terrifies me more than any gunfight." He took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "I love you. I want to build a life with you, whether that's in Desdemona or here on the ranch or somewhere else entirely." "Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Hannah's vision as joy welled up inside her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Vaughn Mitchell, I will marry you." His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. This time there was no hesitation as he drew her into his arms and kissed her, a kiss full of promise and passion and plans for the future. When they finally broke apart, breathless and laughing, Vaughn pressed his forehead against hers. "I should probably tell you that my mother already suspected this might happen today. She may have a celebration planned for dinner." Hannah laughed. "Is that why she was so welcoming? She knew I might become her daughter-in-law." "She was welcoming because she's a good woman who trusts my judgment," Vaughn corrected gently. "But yes, I may have mentioned my intentions before we arrived." Hand in hand, they walked back to the house, where Alina took one look at their faces and the ring on Hannah's finger and burst into happy tears. "I knew it," she exclaimed, embracing them both. "Oh, my dears, I'm so happy for you." Victor appeared from the barn, grinning when he saw their joined hands. "Well, that didn't take long. Congratulations, brother. Miss Kingston, it seems I'll be calling you sister soon." The celebration that followed was one of the happiest evenings of Hannah's life. The Mitchell family welcomed her as if she had always been part of them. And as she sat beside Vaughn at dinner, his hand occasionally finding hers beneath the table, she marveled at how completely her life had changed in just a few short months. "When will the wedding be?" Alina asked as they enjoyed apple pie for dessert. Vaughn looked at Hannah. "That depends on several things. I need to give my captain an answer about the Austin position, and Hannah needs to fulfill her teaching contract. The school board hired me for the full academic year," Hannah explained. "That ends in May." "A spring wedding then," Alina said, clearly pleased. "That gives us plenty of time to plan." "And where will you live after?" Victor asked. "Austin's a growing city, lot of opportunities there." Vaughn squeezed Hannah's hand. "We haven't decided yet. There's the option of the ranger position in Austin, but I've also considered returning to the ranch. There's plenty of work here, and with the oil boom in Desdemona, land values are increasing. It might be the right time to expand our operations. You'd give up being a ranger?" Victor asked, surprised. Vaughn's eyes held Hannah's. "For the right reason, yes." The conversation continued late into the evening with plans and possibilities flowing freely. When it was finally time for Hannah and Vaughn to return to Desdemona, Alina insisted they take a basket of food and a promise to return the following Sunday. The ride back to town was quiet but comfortable, with Hannah nestled against Vaughn's side on the wagon seat. The stars overhead seemed especially bright, as if celebrating with them. "Are you happy?" Vaughn asked softly. Hannah smiled up at him. "Happier than I ever thought possible. When I left Boston, I was running away from loss and debt. I never imagined I'd find a future so full of promise." Vaughn's arm tightened around her. "When I joined the Rangers, I was running too from the memories of the war, from the emptiness of coming home to find my father gone. I thought justice was all that mattered. I never expected to find someone who would make me want more than that." They arrived back in Desdemona well after midnight. Despite the late hour, Vaughn insisted on escorting Hannah to her door above the schoolhouse. "Will you be at the ranch tomorrow?" Hannah asked as they climbed the stairs. "No, I need to ride to Fort Worth to meet with my captain about the Austin position," Vaughn replied. I'll be gone for 3 days, possibly 4. Hannah tried not to show her disappointment. I understand, your career is important. Vaughn tilted her chin up, his eyes serious in the dim lamplight. You're more important, but I need to handle this properly. Give my notice in person if that's what I decide. And is it what you've decided? He smiled down at her. I think you know the answer to that. My future is with you, Hannah. The only question is where we build it. Their goodnight kiss was tender and lingering, a promise of many more to come. The next few months passed in a whirlwind of teaching, wedding preparations, and decisions about their future. Vaughn ultimately declined the position in Austin, choosing instead to return to the Mitchell Ranch. He would help expand their operations to include some of the promising oil land near Desdemona, while Hannah would finish out the school year before joining him. Word of their engagement spread quickly through the small town. Hannah's students were particularly excited, peppering her with questions about her wedding dress and whether she would continue teaching after she was married. Of course I will, Hannah assured them. Though I may not be your teacher, the Mitchell Ranch is quite a distance from Desdemona. As Christmas approached, Hannah found herself torn between excitement for her future and a certain melancholy at the thought of leaving her first teaching position. She had grown to love her students and the small community that had welcomed her so warmly. Vaughn noticed her quietness as they decorated a small Christmas tree in her rooms one evening in mid-December. "What's troubling you?" he asked, setting down a glass ornament Mrs. Porter had given them. Hannah sighed. "I was just thinking about the school. I've become so attached to the children and the thought of leaving them." Vaughn took her hands in his. "What if you didn't have to choose?" "What do you mean?" "I've been talking with the town council," Vaughn explained. With the oil boom bringing more families to the area, they're considering building a second school halfway between Desdemona and the Mitchell Ranch. They've asked if you might be interested in being the headmistress. Hannah's eyes widened. "Headmistress of my own school?" Vaughn nodded. "It would mean overseeing 2 or 3 teachers, developing the curriculum and teaching the older students yourself. The salary would be considerably more than you're earning now. And we could live. My father built a small house on the eastern edge of our property years ago as a wedding gift for my brother Vincent. But Vincent's wife preferred city living, so they settled in Austin instead. The house has stood empty since. It would need some work, but it's almost exactly halfway between the ranch and where the new school would be built." Hope bloomed in Hannah's chest. "So I could continue teaching and you could work the ranch and we wouldn't have to choose between our passions." "That's the idea," Vaughn said, smiling at her excitement. "What do you think?" Hannah threw her arms around him. "I think you're remarkable, Vaughn Mitchell, and I love you more than I can say." Their wedding took place on the first Saturday in May, with the schoolhouse transformed by wildflowers and ribbon for the occasion. Sheriff Harding gave Hannah away, Mrs. Porter played the piano, and Hannah's students formed a choir that sang surprisingly well under the direction of the church organist. Vaughn stood tall and handsome at the altar in a new black suit, his ranger badge pinned to his lapel for the ceremony, a symbol of the service that had brought them together. Hannah wore a gown of ivory satin that Alina had helped her select on a special shopping trip to Fort Worth. As they exchanged vows before the entire population of Desdemona and half the surrounding county, Hannah thought of how far she had come from that terrified young woman who had fainted in fear during the stagecoach robbery. That day, when Vaughn caught her and whispered, "You're safe," had been the beginning of a journey neither of them could have anticipated. Now, as Vaughn slipped a gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, and as they were pronounced husband and wife, Hannah knew that she had found not just safety, but love, purpose, and a future brighter than she had ever dared hope for. The celebration continued well into the night, with dancing and feasting and so many well wishes that Hannah's cheeks hurt from smiling. When they finally departed in Vaughn's wagon, now decorated with ribbons and tin cans that clattered merrily behind them, the townspeople lined the street to wave them off. Vaughn had insisted on keeping their honeymoon destination a surprise. It wasn't until they were well away from town that he told her they were heading to San Antonio for a week. "I've never been there," Hannah admitted, nestled against her husband's side beneath a blanket against the evening chill. "It's a beautiful city," Vaughn told her. "There's the Alamo, of course, but also the river that runs through the city and Spanish architecture unlike anything else in Texas. I thought you'd enjoy the history." "I'd enjoy anywhere as long as I'm with you," Hannah said, earning a tender kiss. They spent their honeymoon exploring San Antonio by day and discovering each other by night. Hannah had been nervous about the intimate aspects of marriage, but Vaughn proved as gentle and considerate in the bedroom as he was in all other areas of their relationship. When they returned to Desdemona, it was to finalize the school year and oversee the renovations to the small house that would become their home. By mid-June, they were settled in their new residence, a charming four-room structure situated on a gentle rise overlooking a creek that flowed through Mitchell land. The summer passed in a haze of happiness as Hannah and Vaughn established their new life together. Vaughn divided his time between the main ranch operations and developing the eastern section of their property, while Hannah worked with the town council on plans for the new school, which would open in September. In August, as they celebrated their third month of marriage with a picnic by the creek, Hannah shared news that would change their lives once again. "I've been to see Dr. Jenkins," she said as they sat on a blanket beneath the shade of a large oak tree. Vaughn looked concerned. "Are you ill?" "You've seemed tired lately." Hannah smiled and took his hand, placing it gently on her still flat stomach. "Not ill, just expecting your child." Vaughn's expression transformed from concern to wonder in an instant. "A baby, we're going to have a baby." Hannah nodded, laughing as he gathered her into a fierce embrace. "Dr. Jenkins thinks the baby will arrive in early February. I should be able to start the school year as planned and work until Christmas." Vaughn could hardly contain his joy, peppering her face with kisses. "A child, our child." "Hannah, you've made me the happiest man in Texas." As autumn arrived, bringing cooler weather and the opening of the new school, Hannah found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this point. From the terror of the stagecoach robbery to the joy of teaching, from the first stirrings of love to the deep bond she now shared with Vaughn, from the anticipation of building a new school to the wonder of creating a new life, her path had been unexpected but perfect in its own way. The new school, named Mitchell Academy in honor of Vaughn's father, opened with 48 students and 3 teachers, including Hannah as headmistress. Though her pregnancy advanced, Hannah found energy in the enthusiasm of her students and the support of her staff. Vaughn proved to be an attentive husband, insisting on driving her to and from school each day as her condition progressed. Their evenings were spent planning for the baby's arrival, converting their 4th room into a nursery, Hannah sewing tiny garments, and Vaughn crafting a cradle from oak harvested from their land. "My father made cradles for all 3 of us," he told Hannah as he worked. "It seems right to continue the tradition." On a snowy February morning, after a long but uncomplicated labor attended by Dr. Jenkins and Alina Mitchell, Hannah gave birth to a healthy son whom they named James Henry Mitchell, James after Vaughn's father and Henry after Hannah's. As Hannah held their son, with Vaughn seated beside her on the bed, his arm around them both, she thought of how completely her life had transformed since that fateful day on the stagecoach. "He's perfect," Vaughn whispered, gently touching their son's tiny fingers. "Yes," Hannah agreed, leaning against her husband's strong shoulder. "Perfect." In the years that followed, their family and their dreams grew together. Hannah continued as headmistress even after the birth of their daughter, Alina Rose, 2 years later. Vaughn expanded the ranch operations successfully, eventually bringing in Victor as a full partner when their oil investments proved profitable. The small house on the rise was enlarged to accommodate their growing family, but they kept the original 4 rooms intact, a reminder of their first home together. Sometimes, on summer evenings, they would sit on their porch and watch their children play in the yard, marveling at how much their lives had changed. Hannah kept the river stone Vaughn had given her on a small shelf in their bedroom, a reminder of the journey that had brought them together. "Do you ever think about that day?" Hannah asked one such evening as they watched 5-year-old James chasing his 3-year-old sister around an oak tree. "The day we met," Vaughn took her hand, running his thumb over the simple gold band that accompanied her engagement ring. "Every day," he admitted. "I think about how close I came to being too late and how empty my life would have been without you in it." Hannah leaned her head against his shoulder. "When you caught me and whispered that I was safe, I had no idea you were saving me for this life, for this happiness." Vaughn pressed a kiss to her temple. "I think perhaps we saved each other." As the Texas sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, painting their home and land in golden light, Hannah knew he was right. From fear had come courage, from danger had come safety, and from a chance meeting on a terrible day had come a love that would last a lifetime. They had built something precious together, a family, a home, a legacy. And it had all begun with those simple words whispered in a moment of crisis. "You're safe." In Hannah's experience, those words had proven true in ways she could never have imagined. With Vaughn, she had found not just physical safety but emotional sanctuary, a place where she was free to grow, to dream, to love, and to be loved in return. As darkness fell and they called their children in for supper, Hannah offered up a silent prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought them here, a journey that, for all its dangers and heartaches, had led to a happiness more profound than she had ever dared to hope for. And in that moment, with her family gathered around her, Hannah Kingston Mitchell knew that she was truly, completely safe and blessed beyond measure.